So let's start with a question. What if you had to make a choice between becoming wildly, unbelievably rich and pursuing the one thing you were truly passionate about, knowing it would probably keep you poor? It sounds dramatic, I know, but it was the very real choice facing one of the most important figures in the history of science, Michael Faraday.
But before we get to that massive, life-altering decision, you really need to understand who this man was. He wasn't just some other scientist in a lab coat. He was, by all accounts, an absolute giant in his field.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. This quote right here, it's from his contemporary and friend, John Tyndall. To the people around him, in his own time, Faraday was already a legend, a mighty investigator whose work they knew was going to change everything.
Now, what makes his story just so incredible is where he started. You have to remember, back then, science was mostly a playground for the rich, for guys who went to fancy universities. Faraday? Not so much. He was the son of a blacksmith who became an apprentice to a bookbinder. But right there, that's where the magic happened. He started teaching himself by literally devouring the books he was supposed to be binding. And he turned that knowledge into this incredibly disciplined system, meticulously numbering every single paragraph of his research to connect all his ideas.
Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of the story. As his fame started to explode, Faraday found himself at a crossroads, one that would not only define his life, but honestly would end up shaping our entire modern world.
So after he makes this huge discovery, magnetoelectricity, the commercial world comes knocking, big time. Companies were lining up to throw enormous amounts of money at him for his expertise. But he knew he couldn't do both. He couldn't serve two masters, as they say. He had to choose.
So on one side, you've got this super lucrative commercial career, what he called professional business. You know, consulting, doing analysis, being an expert witness. And on the other side, what he called unendowed science, the pure, unadulterated pursuit of discovery just for the sake of knowing.
And let's be totally clear about the stakes here. We are not talking about a small pay bump. By 1832, Faraday could have been pulling in 5,000 pounds a year. Now that might not sound like a crazy number today, but in the 1830s, that's the equivalent of millions. This wasn't a choice between being comfortable and being a little more comfortable. This was a choice between science and being fabulously wealthy.
And this slide just perfectly illustrates what he did. These numbers come straight from his own account books. Check it out. In 1830, he's making over 1,000 pounds from this kind of work. 2 years later, after he's made his choice, it drops to just 155 pounds. And by 1838, a big, fat zero. He deliberately and systematically turned off the money faucet.
He chose science. In that decision, it was so much more profound than just giving up a paycheck. At a time when scientists needed rich patrons or had to do commercial work just to fund their research, Faraday's choice was revolutionary. By giving up that income, he bought himself the one thing that was more valuable than any amount of money: total and absolute freedom, to follow his curiosity wherever it might lead. And that choice, well, it changed the world.
So by turning his back on all that wealth, what did he end up giving us instead? Well, for starters, he gave us a whole new language, a language for electricity.
Take a look at this. It's a page from his famous experimental researches. And yeah, it might just seem like a wall of text, but notice those little numbers marking every paragraph? That was his trademark, his system for bringing perfect order to his thoughts. And that orderly mind was about to bring some much-needed order to the chaos of a brand new science.
I mean, just try to put yourself in his shoes. You're discovering all these fundamental things about electricity, which is this totally invisible force. How do you even begin to describe what you're seeing? The words to explain it, they just don't exist yet. So what do? You invent them. Faraday knew he couldn't use the old vocabulary to describe these new discoveries, so he just created a new one, often reaching back to the ancient Greek he'd taught himself for inspiration. He's the one who gave us the word anode. It's the surface where electricity goes into something. And the name itself comes from Greek words that mean up and away, which is just a beautiful metaphor for the sunrise. And of course, for every sunrise, you need a sunset. So he gave us the cathode, where the electricity passes out. The name comes from the Greek for down and away, just like the sun setting. It's this perfectly logical and kind of poetic system, isn't it?
Okay, so you've got a starting point and an end point. But what about the little things actually doing the traveling, the particles carrying the electric charge back and forth? He needed a word for them too. He called them ions, a word that is absolutely essential to chemistry and physics today.
Anode, cathode, ion, electrolyte. These aren't just obscure science terms.
This is the fundamental vocabulary, the very building blocks of our entire understanding of electricity and chemistry, and they all came from the mind of Michael Faraday.
But you know, his legacy isn't just about the scientific breakthroughs. It's also about his character, this deep, unwavering humility that defined him right up until the very end.
Get this. He was urged to accept the presidency of the Royal Society. I mean, that is the highest honor in British science, and he turned it down. He said he feared that all the responsibility and distraction would hurt his work and his integrity. His own words were, "I must remain plain Michael Faraday to the last."
And that just tells you everything you need to know about what drove him, right? It was never, ever about the fame or the fortune or the fancy titles. He once told a friend that the sweetest reward of his entire life's work was the goodwill and sympathy he got from other scientists around the world. That was the only currency that really mattered to him.
And I just want to leave you with this one last thought from Faraday himself. For him, the subject itself was the reward. The glory was in the discovery, in the work, a process that he said could enchant and delight anyone who was a part of it. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What glorious subjects might we be overlooking in our own lives?